The air was heavy with smoke, and the ground was torn by deep scars of war. Broken machines lay scattered, their metal frames glowing faintly from the recent battle. The sky was painted in red and gray as fire burned in the distance. Among the wreckage, a lone human soldier moved carefully, his eyes scanning the ruins for survivors or threats. His name was Miran. Miran's boots crunched on the black soil as he passed shattered helmets and broken weapons. He had been separated from his unit when the enemy struck hard, scattering the humans and their uneasy allies. Silence now filled the battlefield, broken only by the crackle of fire and the groan of shifting metal. He tightened the grip on his rifle, ready for anything. As Moran turned a corner near a ruined transport, he heard a sound. It was not human. It was a deep, guttural cry of pain. He froze for a moment, his heart racing. Slowly, he lowered his weapon and followed the sound. Behind a fallen beam, he saw a figure leaning against the rubble. It was an alien warrior. The alien's massive frame was slumped, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His armor was cracked and scorched. A glowing arrow made of strange biomaterial was lodged deep into his side. The arrow pulsed with faint light, as if alive. The warrior's hand gripped the shaft, but every attempt to pull it only made him collapse further. Miran's first instinct was to stay back. These aliens were known for their pride and cruelty in war. They rarely spared humans and had little trust in them. Yet something about this scene was different. This was not a battle. This was a warrior on the edge of death. The alien lifted his head and glared at Miran. His eyes, sharp and burning, locked on him. His voice was rough, filled with pain. "Human," he growled. "Stay away." Miran raised his free hand slowly, showing no threat. "I am not here to fight. You are hurt. That arrow will kill you if it stays inside," the alien coughed, his breath rattling. "I do not need your weak hands on me. Leave me." Miran felt a surge of conflict inside. He knew he should keep moving, find his own unit, and avoid danger. But he could not walk away. The arrow was like nothing he had ever seen before. It looked as if it had been designed not just to wound, but to keep its victim in agony. No one deserved that fate. Not even an enemy. "I cannot leave you like this," Miran said firmly. "I have some training in battlefield medicine. Maybe I can help." The alien laughed bitterly, but the laugh turned into a groan of pain. "Your kind knows nothing of wounds like this. You will fail, and I will die anyway." Miran crouched beside him, keeping a respectful distance. He studied the arrow closely. Its surface shifted slightly, like a living material. The wound around it was swollen and burning with strange colors. "You are right," Miran admitted. "I have never seen this before. But I know one thing. If the arrow stays inside, you will not last long." The alien's jaw tightened. His breathing grew heavier, and for the first time, his eyes showed not only anger but fear. He was a warrior, trained never to reveal weakness, yet the pain was breaking through his pride. Miran reached into his pack and pulled out a small kit. It was basic: bandages, clamps, and a knife. Nothing compared to the advanced medical units the aliens used. Still, it was all he had. "What is your name?" Miran asked, trying to keep the alien awake. The alien hesitated, then answered with a low growl. "Torvak." "Miran," the human replied. "Listen, Torvak. If I try to remove the arrow, it will hurt, but it is the only way you might survive. Do you understand?" Torvak's eyes narrowed. His pride fought against his pain. At last he gave a slow nod. "Do it, human. But if you fail, I will curse you with my last breath." Miran almost smiled. Even near death, the alien's spirit was unbroken. He placed his kit beside him and prepared his tools. His hands shook slightly, not from fear of the wound, but from the weight of what he was about to attempt. Saving an enemy was dangerous. If others found out, both his people and Torvak's might see it as betrayal. But at that moment, there was no human and no alien. There were only two beings on a broken battlefield, one trying to keep the other alive. Miran looked again at the arrow. It was not made of metal, but some form of energy-bound matter. Strange veins of light spread from it into Torvak's flesh. Cutting it out would be risky. Still, he steadied himself. As he brought the knife close, Torvak gritted his teeth. "Do not hesitate, human. A warrior does not fear pain." Miran nodded. "Then stay strong. I will try my best." The first touch of the blade made Torvak shudder. His muscles tense like iron. The alien's breath came in sharp bursts, but he did not scream. Miran worked with care, his eyes locked on the wound, searching for a way to free the arrow without tearing deeper. Sweat formed on his forehead, but his focus did not waver. The battlefield around them seemed silent now, as if the world itself held its breath. Torvak's voice broke through the quiet, rough and strained. "Why are you doing this, human? We are not friends. We are not brothers. Why save me?" Miran did not look up. His voice was calm, steady. "Because no one deserves to die like this. If there is a chance to save a life, I will take it, even if it belongs to someone who once stood against me." For the first time, Torvak's fierce expression softened. His eyes showed confusion, perhaps even respect. He could not understand why a human would risk so much for him. The knife touched the base of the arrow, and the wound pulsed with light. Torvak gasped, his hand digging into the rubble beside him. His pride nearly broke as pain surged through him. "Please," he growled through clenched teeth. "Take it out." The words hung in the air. They were not just a command, but a cry of surrender to his suffering. For a warrior like Torvak, it was almost unthinkable. But Miran understood. He pressed forward, determined to free him from the cruel weapon. The night around them grew darker as the fires burned lower. Two figures remained locked in a struggle, not against each other, but against death itself. The glow of the strange arrow pulsed faintly in the dim light. Miran's hands were steady, but his mind raced. He knew that every second counted. The arrow was not a simple weapon. It was alive in some way, designed to keep the wound open and the victim weak. Human training had prepared him for bullets, burns, and broken bones, but not for this. Torvak clenched his teeth as his body trembled. He was a warrior, proud and strong, but the pain had grown beyond anything he had faced in battle. His eyes burned with stubborn fire, refusing to show weakness even as his strength faded. "Human," Torvak growled, his voice harsh. "You cannot win against this wound. My people's science could not break this weapon's hold. Do not think your tools of iron and fire will succeed." Miran wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve. He kept his focus on the wound. "Maybe your people gave up too quickly," he replied. "Humans survive by trying when others give up. I will not stop now." Torvak gave a bitter laugh, but it turned into a cough of pain. His blood, dark and thick, stained the broken ground. He glared at Miran with pride still unbroken. "You think stubbornness will defeat this arrow? Foolish! You should save your strength for your own people." Miran pressed his hand gently near the wound, watching how the light reacted. The veins of glowing material spread further with every breath Torvak took. It was as if the arrow was trying to claim more of him. Miran leaned closer, studying the strange reaction. He realized it was not only cutting into flesh, it was feeding on energy, draining the warrior's strength. "You call it foolishness," Miran said softly, "but I call it hope. And I will not leave you here to die." Torvak stared at him in silence. For the first time, he wondered if this human's will was more dangerous than any weapon. Miran tried pulling gently on the arrow's shaft. At once, Torvak's body arched in agony. The glow brightened, and his cry shook the ruins around them. "Stop!" Torvak snarled, his voice filled. with rage. "Do not tear me apart." Moran let go at once. His jaw tightened in frustration. Brute force was useless. He could not simply drag it out. He had to find another way. "You see now," Torvak said through gritted teeth. "Your help is worthless. Leave me. At least then I can die as a warrior should, not as some experiment under human hands." Moran ignored the insult. He opened his pack again and searched for anything that might help. Bandages, clamps, his field knife, a vial of antiseptic. None of it was meant for something like this. Still, he could not walk away. "Your kind speaks of warriors," Moran said while preparing his tools. "But a true warrior does not give up while there is a chance to fight. I am fighting for your life right now, whether you like it or not." Torvak's eyes narrowed. He wanted to shout, to push the human away, but his body betrayed him. His vision blurred, and his breath came shallow. The truth struck him hard. He could no longer fight alone. Moran leaned closer. "Listen to me, Torvak. I need you to trust me. If you resist, I cannot save you. You must let me try." The alien warrior's pride battled with his fear. Trusting a human was something he had sworn never to do. Yet the truth was clear. No medic of his people would come. No comrade would find him here. Only this human stood between him and death. "Trust," Torvak muttered bitterly. "Your kind lies. You cheat. Why should I place my life in your hands?" Moran met his gaze without flinching. "Because I have no reason to lie. You are my enemy, but I am still choosing to help you. That is not a trick. That is choice." Silence stretched between them. The fire in the distance crackled, and the wind carried the smell of smoke. Finally, Torvak closed his eyes. His chest rose and fell slowly as he spoke. "Very well, human. Do what you will. But know this. If I survive and find betrayal in your actions, I will end you." Moran gave a small nod. Fair enough. With that uneasy agreement, Moran got to work. He sterilized the knife with fire and carefully pressed it against the skin around the arrow. Torvak tensed, but he did not resist. His jaw clenched as the blade cut through and his fingers dug into the dirt. The human worked with calm focus, ignoring Torvak's growls and shudders of pain. Every cut revealed more of the strange biomaterial. It pulsed like a living vein wrapping tightly around flesh. Moran realized pulling it free would tear everything apart. He paused, thinking deeply. Then he had an idea. Human problem-solving had always been about adaptation. If the arrow resisted force, maybe he could weaken it first. Moran poured antiseptic on the wound. Torvak roared in pain as the liquid hissed against the glowing material. For a moment, the light dimmed. "It reacts," Moran whispered to himself. "Good. That means it can be weakened." Torvak gasped heavily, sweat covering his face. His pride was breaking, replaced by raw survival. His voice trembled, though he tried to hide it. "Human, whatever you are doing, finish it quickly." Moran nodded, his own determination burning stronger. "I will, but you must hold on." He soaked cloth with more antiseptic and pressed it against the base of the arrow. The glow dimmed further, though not completely. Slowly, carefully, he pressed the knife deeper, cutting the strange tendrils that connected the weapon to Torvak's flesh. Torvak's entire body shook, but he did not cry out this time. He was too weak. His eyes locked on Moran's face, searching for lies, but finding only focus. In that moment, a thought came to him. His people always said humans were fragile, weak, and full of fear. Yet here was one, risking his life to save an enemy with nothing but simple tools and stubborn courage. Perhaps humans were not what his people believed. Torvak let his head fall back against the rubble, his strength fading fast. "If you succeed, human, then I will owe you more than life." Moran did not answer. He kept working, his knife steady, his hands sure. Failure was not an option. As the night grew colder, and the flames in the distance dimmed, the struggle between pride and trust slowly began to shift. The ruins around them were quiet, but inside the broken walls, the fight for survival continued. Miran's hands worked with steady care, though his heart pounded in his chest. The glowing arrow still pulsed in Torvak's side, feeding on his strength. Every minute that passed brought the alien warrior closer to death. Torvak's breaths were shallow, but his eyes stayed open, filled with fire. He was determined not to lose consciousness, even as pain racked his body. "Human," he muttered in a strained voice, "you waste your effort. This weapon was made to break the strongest of us. What makes you believe you can remove it?" Moran kept his gaze fixed on the wound. "Because I have to believe I can. If I stop now, you will die. I am not ready to watch that happen." The alien growled softly, more in frustration than anger. "Your words are strange. My kind believes only in victory or death, yet you speak of refusing to accept death as if it were another battle to fight." Moran gave a faint smile as he adjusted his grip on the arrow's shaft. "Maybe that is the human way. We fight death every day, not always with weapons, but with will." Torvak did not reply. He clenched his jaw, waiting for what came next. Moran placed one hand firmly near the wound and wrapped the other around the arrow. He took a deep breath, then pulled with controlled strength. At once, Torvak roared in agony. His body arched as the arrow resisted. The glow spread wider, sending streaks of light through the veins around the wound. It felt as though the weapon was alive, clinging to its host. "Stop!" Torvak bellowed, his voice echoing across the ruins. His hands struck the ground hard, cracking the stone beneath them. Moran released his grip instantly. His chest rose and fell rapidly, sweat dripping down his face. The arrow had not moved at all. In fact, it seemed to have burrowed deeper. Torvak's breathing was ragged. His eyes burned with fury. "Do you see now, human? You cannot remove it with force. It feeds on my body, on my strength. Pull harder, and it will tear me apart." Moran sat back on his heels, frustration growing inside him. He had tried, and it had nearly killed the alien, but he was not ready to give up. "Then I must think differently," Moran said quietly. He looked at the arrow again. The faint glow seemed to flicker whenever Torvak's body shifted, as if it were connected not only to flesh but to energy within him. It was no ordinary weapon. Torvak pressed his head against the rubble, his voice hoarse. "Your people always believed we were stronger, faster, greater than you. Yet now you see the truth. Even we cannot defeat this. What chance does a human have?" Moran met his gaze firmly. "Sometimes strength is not the answer. Sometimes survival comes from finding another way. That is how humans have lived for centuries." Torvak frowned. His pride resisted, but he could not deny the human's persistence. "If you are right, then show me. Do not waste my pain with empty words." Moran leaned close to study the weapon again. He noticed that the glow dimmed slightly when he had poured antiseptic earlier. It was not much, but it was a reaction. That meant the arrow could be weakened. He soaked a cloth with more antiseptic and pressed it gently against the base of the wound. Torvak growled as the liquid burned, but he held still. The glow flickered once more, weaker this time. "There," Moran whispered. "It does not like this." Torvak raised an eyebrow, though his face was tight with pain. "You mean to kill the weapon with medicine? Absurd." "Absurd or not," Moran said, "it is the only lead I have. And it means this weapon is not invincible." The alien warrior fell silent, letting the human continue. Moran pressed the cloth again, holding it firm. He could feel the faint vibration from the arrow weaken slightly. It was like fighting an enemy with patience instead of strength. Slowly, carefully, he worked at cutting the thin strands of glowing matter that connected the arrow to Torvak's flesh. Torvak's body trembled, but he did not resist. His pride no longer mattered as much as survival. He closed his eyes, focusing on breathing through the pain. "Why do you do this, human?" he asked at last, his voice low. "You could. Leave me here. You could let me die and your people would never know." Miran did not stop working. "Because I would know. That is enough reason." Torvak opened his eyes again, staring at him with confusion. He had lived his life believing humans were weak, selfish, and unworthy of respect. Yet here was one, risking everything to save him. It shook his belief in ways no battle ever had. Minutes passed like hours. Miran's hands grew tired, but he kept going. Each cut freed more of the weapon, though its hold was not broken. At last, Miran leaned back, breathing hard. "I cannot remove it fully yet, but I am learning. Each reaction tells me more. I will find a way." Torvak shifted slightly, groaning. "You surprise me, human. No warrior of my people would fight so long for an enemy. Perhaps you are mad." "Maybe I am," Miran admitted with a faint smile. "But madness can save lives." The alien studied him for a long moment. His voice softened, though it still carried the weight of pride. "If you succeed, human, you will not only save me. You will prove that your kind is more than we believed," Irani met his gaze with calm determination. "Then let me prove it." The night deepened around them, the distant fires fading to embers. On the battlefield, silence reigned. Yet in the ruins, a bond was slowly forming. Not of friendship, not yet, but of shared struggle and stubborn will. The ruined battlefield lay in silence, but inside the broken shelter, the struggle between life and death continued. Torvak sat against the rubble, his large frame trembling with exhaustion. The strange arrow still pulsed in his side, glowing faintly with alien light. His body was strong, but even the strongest warrior could not fight forever. Miran sat across from him, tools spread out on the ground. His face was tired, yet his eyes were sharp with thought. He had tried pulling the arrow out with force, but it only caused greater pain and nearly killed Torvak. He had cut at the tendrils that bound it, but the weapon fought back, clinging stubbornly to its host. It was no ordinary wound. It was a trap made to claim lives. Torvak's voice was weak, but edged with pride. "You see now, human, your strength and your tools cannot defeat this weapon. It is beyond you." Miran shook his head. "No. I see that brute strength is not the answer, but there is always another way. Humans survive because we adapt. We do not give up when one path fails. We make another path." Torvak gave a faint laugh, though it turned into a groan. "You speak as if your will alone will break this curse." Miran ignored the remark and studied the wound again. The glow was not constant. Sometimes it pulsed brighter when Torvak moved, other times weaker when the antiseptic touched it. That meant the weapon could be affected. He reached for his knife and a small piece of metal from the wreckage nearby. Heating it over a small flame, he waited until it glowed faintly red. Torvak watched with narrowed eyes. "What are you doing, human?" the alien demanded. Miran answered calmly. "Fire cleanses. It kills infection. Maybe it can weaken this weapon too." Torvak growled. "You would burn me? Even our medics do not use such primitive methods." Miran met his gaze. "Primitive does not mean useless. Sometimes the old ways work when nothing else does. You want to live? Then trust me. Then trust." The alien's eyes blazed with anger, but his body betrayed him. He was too weak to argue for long. At last he gave a slow nod. "Do it." Moran pressed the heated metal carefully against the base of the wound. The air filled with the sharp scent of burning flesh, and Torvak roared in pain, his fists smashing the ground until stone cracked beneath them. But the glow around the arrow flickered violently, shrinking for the first time since the battle. Moran pulled the metal back quickly. His hand shook from the intensity of the moment. It worked. The weapon reacts to heat. It does not like it. Torvak panted heavily, his chest rising and falling. His voice trembled with both pain and awe. Your methods, crude, brutal, yet they cut the weapon's strength. You humans truly are mad. Moran allowed himself a small smile. Madness keeps us alive. You should know that by now. He cleaned his blade again and prepared for the next step. This time, instead of burning, he used a mix of cloth, antiseptic, and steady pressure. He worked around the wound, cutting carefully at the glowing veins that connected the arrow to Torvak's body. Every time the light fought back, he pressed with more heat, weakening it until it loosened. Torvak gritted his teeth, refusing to scream again. His pride as a warrior demanded silence, but his eyes betrayed the storm of pain within him. He watched the human work, amazed by his focus. No alien medic would ever use such crude methods, yet somehow this man was making progress. Between cuts and burns, Moran spoke softly. Your people call us fragile. They say we are weak because we lack the strength or weapons of other races. But we survive by finding ways others ignore. We use what we have. That is our strength. Torvak's lips curled into a faint grimace. Perhaps your strength is not of body, but of spirit. I have fought many enemies, human, but none as stubborn as you. Moran gave no reply. His attention stayed on the arrow, his knife carving gently, his hands steady despite exhaustion. After long minutes, he finally freed a section of the arrow's base. The glow flickered again, weaker this time. The weapon seemed smaller, as if it was losing its grip. Torvak's eyes widened slightly. You are winning against it. Not yet, Moran replied, but soon. Torvak leaned back against the rubble, his strength nearly gone. He had never trusted humans. To him, they were prey on the battlefield, fragile beings who broke easily. Yet this one human had stayed, fought, and endured more than many warriors he had known. It shook him deeply. Why? Torvak asked suddenly. His voice was low but firm. Why do you risk yourself for me? I would not have done the same if our roles were reversed. Moran paused only for a moment, then continued his work. Because I am human. We do not choose who deserves life and who does not. We save who we can. Maybe one day, that same mercy will come back to us, or maybe not. But it is who we are. Torvak stared at him for a long time. For the first time in his life, he felt respect for a human. Not fear, not scorn, but respect. The glow of the arrow dimmed further as Moran pressed the heated metal once more. Torvak clenched his fists but did not cry out. He endured, because he believed now that the human might succeed. When Moran finally stepped back, his hands were trembling, his face pale with exhaustion. But the arrow's hold was weaker than ever before. It is not free yet, he said quietly. But the weapon is breaking down. I can finish this. You will live. Torvak closed his eyes, breathing heavily. His voice was softer now, no longer filled with pride or anger, but with quiet acceptance. Perhaps your people are not as weak as we believed. Perhaps there is strength in your madness. Moran gave a small nod. There is strength in never giving up. That is what makes us human. The two sat in silence for a while. The night was cold, the battlefield still, yet between them, something had changed. Not just the fight against the arrow, but the bond between two enemies who now saw each other differently. Torvak opened his eyes again, his voice steady despite the pain. "Do not stop now, Miran. Finish what you began. Take it out and let me see if humans truly can do what no alien has done." Miran tightened his grip on his tools. His eyes were tired, but his will burned stronger than ever. He would not stop until the arrow was gone. The night stretched long, and the battlefield outside lay in silence, broken only by the soft crackle of dying fires. Inside the ruined shelter, two figures remained locked in a battle of survival. Miran worked tirelessly, his hands sore from cutting, burning, and pressing against the strange weapon that refused to leave Torvak's body. The alien warrior sat slumped against the rubble, his breaths shallow but steady, his eyes fixed on the human who refused to give up. Torvak had expected to be dead by now. When the arrow had pierced him, he had accepted his fate as any warrior of his people would. Death on the battlefield was an honor, and weakness was shame. Yet here he was, alive still, held between agony and hope by the hands of a single human. Miran's face was pale with exhaustion. His uniform was torn, his hands stained with blood, some his own, some Torvak's. Yet his eyes had not lost their sharpness. They burned with focus, with the stubborn will that had carried him this far. Torvak finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "Human, why do you endure this with me? You could walk away. No one would blame you." Miran did not look up from the wound. "Because leaving you here would mean I let death win. I cannot do that." The alien warrior frowned. "You speak of death as if it were an enemy you could fight with blade and shield." Miran gave a faint smile. "In a way it is. Every soldier I have known has fought against death. Sometimes we lose, but sometimes we win. And I plan to win here." Torvak fell silent, thinking about those words. His people had always seen humans as fragile, weak in body, quick to fall in war. But watching Miran now, he realized something he had never believed before. Humans had a strength his kind did not understand. It was not in muscle or weaponry. It was in spirit. Miran pressed heated metal against the wound again. Torvak roared, his voice shaking the ruins. His fists slammed into the ground, cracking stone. Yet he did not resist. He let the human continue, trusting that this strange pain was leading to survival. When the glow around the arrow flickered weaker than before, Miran leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow. "It is working. Slowly, but it is working." Torvak breathed heavily, his chest rising and falling like a great machine pushed beyond its limit. His pride battled with the truth he could no longer deny. He was alive not because of his strength, but because of the human's refusal to give up. "Your people," Torvak muttered. "We have mocked you for centuries. We called you weak. We thought you were nothing but prey among the stars. Yet here you are, fighting death itself with nothing but fire and cloth. Perhaps we were wrong." Miran glanced at him briefly, his expression calm. "Maybe. Or maybe you only saw what you wanted to see. Humans may not be the strongest, but we survive. That is our gift." Torvak let out a harsh breath. Something between a laugh and a sigh. "Survive, yes, I see it now. You are like fire in the ashes. Even when crushed, you rise again." For a moment, silence returned. Both warrior and soldier rested, though the battle was not yet finished. Miran pulled out his water canteen and offered it to Torvak. The alien hesitated, then took it, drinking slowly. The act itself surprised him. Sharing water with an enemy was not something warriors of his people ever did. "You risk your supplies on me," Torvak said. "Your own strength weakens, yet you give it away." Miran shrugged. "You need it more than I do. If you die, all of this means nothing." Torvak studied him, his sharp eyes narrowing. You are either the most foolish human I have met, or the bravest. Maybe both, Moran replied. The alien leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. He remembered the countless battles he had fought, the enemies he had slain, the victories his people had claimed. None of those moments had felt like this. For the first time, he was not fighting for pride or conquest. He was fighting for life itself, and a human was the one keeping him in that fight. Pain surged again as the arrow pulsed faintly. Torvak's body tensed, his teeth grinding together. Moran reacted quickly, pressing more antiseptic and heat against the wound. The glow dimmed again, weaker than before. You hold on, Moran said firmly. You are not done yet. Torvak forced a laugh through his pain. You speak as if you command me. No one commands me, human. Moran smirked faintly. Then think of it as a challenge. Prove me wrong by surviving. The alien warrior's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed in determination. Very well. I will survive, not because you order it, but because I refuse to die in front of you. Together, they fought through the night. Moran cut, burned, pressed, and worked with relentless focus. Torvak endured every wave of pain, his pride no longer in hiding his weakness, but in holding strong beside the human. At last, when the stars above began to fade into the first light of dawn, the arrow's glow was faint, almost gone. The weapon's hold was breaking. Torvak's voice was hoarse, but his words carried weight. Human, Moran, you are unlike any warrior I have known. You have shown me that strength is not always in the arm that swings the blade, but in the will that refuses to stop. I see now why your kind survives. Perhaps you are stronger than we believed. Moran paused, meeting his gaze. And maybe your people are not as cold as we thought. Maybe there is more to you than pride and conquest. For the first time, Torvak gave a small, genuine smile. Perhaps. They sat together in the quiet, the battle still unfinished, but hope stronger than ever. Torvak had come to the edge of death, but in that fire he had seen a truth he could never forget. Humans were not weak. They were relentless, and that was a power no weapon could destroy. The dawn light filtered through the broken walls of the ruined shelter, painting the battlefield in pale gold and gray. Smoke still curled lazily from fires that had burned through the night. Moran's hands were stiff and sore, his uniform stained with sweat and blood, but his eyes burned with determination. Torvak, though weakened, sat upright against the rubble, his gaze fixed on the human who had refused to give up on him. The strange arrow had been weakened overnight. Its glowing tendrils, once strong and unyielding, now quivered faintly as Moran approached. He had studied its reactions carefully, learned how heat, antiseptic, and careful cutting affected it. Now the final step had come. Torvak's breathing was shallow, his body trembling from exhaustion. Yet there was a spark in his eyes. A warrior's spirit remained, even as his strength ebbed. He watched Moran prepare the tools, feeling a strange mixture of fear, respect, and curiosity. You are ready, Torvak said in a hoarse voice. I can feel it. Either this will kill me, or you will succeed. Moran gave a firm nod. Either way, I will not stop until it is done. Hold on. He pressed the heated metal against the base of the arrow once more, making sure the weapon's hold was weakened as much as possible. The glow pulsed faintly and then diminished, as if the arrow itself sensed its defeat. Torvak winced, gritting his teeth. Your methods, they are strange, alien, yet effective. Moran ignored the comment, focusing on cutting the final strands of glowing material that bound the arrow to Torvak's flesh. Each movement had to be precise. One mistake could end the warrior's life. Sweat dripped from Moran's forehead, but his hands did not tremble. Years of training and the drive to save a life guided every motion. Torvak clenched his fists, his voice low but steady. "Do it quickly. I am not patient, human." "I will," Moran replied calmly. "Just hold. On a little longer." Slowly, carefully, he began lifting the arrow. The glowing tendrils resisted, but they were weak now. The alien's body trembled with pain, but he did not scream. He trusted the human completely, though he would never admit it aloud. As Moran pulled the arrow free, a wave of light surged from the wound. Torvak gasped sharply, his muscles seizing in reflex. Then, almost as suddenly, the glow faded. The arrow fell from his side, inert and harmless. Torvak slumped against the rubble, panting. The pain was intense, but he was alive. Alive because of a human's determination, patience, and ingenuity. Moran lowered the arrow to the ground and exhaled deeply. "It is done. You are free." Torvak stared at the arrow, disbelief in his eyes. "Alive. I am alive." "Yes," Moran said simply. "You survived because you held on and because I refused to quit." Torvak tried to sit up straighter, but his body protested. Moran quickly supported him, helping him balance. The alien warrior's pride would not allow him to ask for help, yet he accepted it silently. You risked yourself for me," Torvak whispered, his voice low, almost reverent. "No human should have stayed. No human should have endured this. Why did you?" Moran smiled faintly, brushing sweat from his forehead. "Because I am human, and humans do not leave someone to die if there is a chance to save them. Even an enemy." Torvak's eyes softened, a feeling he had rarely experienced in his life. Respect, gratitude. He could not deny it. He had been saved, and it was not by superior technology, not by weapons, but by the simple will and creativity of a human. He touched the wound carefully, feeling the absence of the arrow. "Your people, your kind, you are stronger than we imagined. Not with weapons, not with strength, but with will. This is power. This is true strength." Moran nodded. "Strength is more than muscle. It is determination, patience, and the refusal to give up. That is what humans have. And that is what saved you." Torvak's lips curved into a faint, genuine smile. "I have fought many enemies in my life. Many have fallen before me. None have faced a challenge like you, human. None have endured as you have. Perhaps we underestimated your kind for too long." Moran offered him water, which Torvak drank carefully. His body was still weak, but his spirit had returned. He looked at Moran, and for the first time, he saw a warrior he could respect. Not an enemy, but someone who had proven that humans were more than their people had believed. "You have shown me something I did not know," Torvak said softly. "Your courage, your mind, your endurance. Humans may be fragile in body, but in spirit, you are stronger than many of my warriors." Moran shook his head with a faint smile. "Fragile? Perhaps. But we endure. That is our way. That is our strength." Torvak closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the ache in his side slowly fade. His pride was intact, but it had been humbled by truth. Humans were not weak. Humans could fight, survive, and create solutions no alien could predict. He had been saved not by chance, but by determination and ingenuity. Finally, he spoke again, his voice firmer. "Moran, human, I owe you my life, not just for survival, but for showing me the truth. You have changed how I see your kind. You have made me understand something my people never will." Moran nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Then let this be the start, Torvak. We may not be friends yet, but we can be allies. We can survive together." Torvak's eyes met his. Yes, allies. And perhaps one day warriors who fight side by side, not as enemies, but as equals. The two sat in silence for a moment, the early morning light warming their weary bodies. Outside, the battlefield remained broken and quiet. But inside the ruins, a bond had formed, not just of survival, but of respect and understanding. Miran looked at the inert arrow on the ground. Its threat was gone. Torvak's life had been saved, and with it, a lesson had been learned. Strength was not always about weaponry or speed. It was about will, creativity, and endurance. The human had proven it. Torvak finally stood slowly, testing his strength. His movements were careful but steady. He looked at Miran with a newfound respect. Your people, humans, you have something we cannot measure with technology or training. That is why you endure. That is why you survive. Miran nodded. And that is why we will continue to fight, no matter the odds. The alien warrior straightened, his pride restored but changed. He had been humbled, yet inspired. He had seen human strength firsthand, and he could not deny it. Together, the human and alien stepped out into the battlefield, not as enemies, but as survivors. The arrow had been removed. Torvak lived, and the lesson was clear. Humans were not. Weak, and their will could change the course of any battle. The sun had fully risen over the battlefield, casting its golden light across the ruins. Smoke from the fires of the night before drifted lazily into the sky. But the air was calmer now. The battle had ended, and the fight for life between Miran and Torvak had reached its conclusion. Torvak stood carefully, testing his body. The pain from the arrow was still present, but it no longer consumed him. He could feel strength returning, not just to his muscles, but to his spirit. His eyes found Miran, and he saw something he had never expected. A human warrior who had faced death with courage, ingenuity, and unwavering will. You have saved me, Torvak said quietly, his voice steady but full of emotion. I thought humans were fragile. I thought your kind could not endure the trials of war. I was wrong. Miran adjusted his pack and gave a faint nod. Humans survive by finding ways others overlook. We do not give up when one path fails. We make another path. That is our strength. The alien warrior studied him for a long moment. Your strength is not in your body, but in your mind and heart. That is something no weapon can match. Miran smiled faintly. Then perhaps we are stronger than we look. Torvak allowed himself a small, genuine smile. Perhaps we underestimated your kind for too long. Your will, your patience. It saved me. And it has taught me something important. What is that? Miran asked, curious. Humans are not our enemies, Torvak replied. Not by default. Your kind is capable of great courage, of creativity, of compassion even in battle. If we can learn to see that, we can survive together, not just fight against each other. Miran nodded. That is what I hoped you would understand. Survival is easier when we help each other instead of tearing each other apart. Strength comes from unity, not only from weapons or training. Torvak looked around the ruined battlefield. He thought of the warriors he had led, the countless battles he had fought, and the pride that had shaped his life. Yet none of that mattered now as much as the lesson he had learned. Humans, he realized, were more than prey, more than weak creatures to mock. They were allies in ways his people had never imagined. He stepped closer to Miran, his movements cautious but purposeful. I owe you my life, human. Not just for surviving the arrow, but for showing me that your kind has power beyond measure. You have taught me humility and respect. Miran placed a hand on his shoulder. You do not owe me anything. You survived because you held on, because you trusted me when it was hard to trust anyone. That is as important as anything I did. Torvak nodded. Then let this be the start. A new understanding between humans and my people. Perhaps we can fight together. In the future, not as enemies, but as allies. Moran smiled. That would be a good start. One step at a time. The battlefield was still quiet, the only sounds being the distant wind and the occasional crackle of dying fires. Yet there was a new energy in the air. Two warriors, once enemies, now shared respect and understanding. Both had faced death and survived. Both had learned that strength came in many forms. Torvak flexed his hands, feeling the ache of recovery, but also the thrill of survival. I will tell my people what I have seen. Humans are not weak. They are cunning, resilient, and unyielding. We must learn to respect that. Moran adjusted his pack, looking out at the horizon. And I will tell my people that aliens are not all enemies. Many are capable of honor, courage, and partnership. It is possible to work together if we choose to. Torvak studied the human closely, his eyes thoughtful. You have changed how I see the galaxy. Perhaps one day, our species will not fight for survival against each other, but for the survival of all. Moran's lips curved into a faint smile. That is the dream, and it begins with one act of trust. One choice to fight not just for ourselves, but for others. The alien warrior took a deep breath, feeling the sun on his skin. Trust. Something I have never offered lightly. Yet here it is, given to a human. I hope your people understand the value of what has been shared today. They will, Moran replied. They will learn if we survive to teach it. And so will your people, if you carry the message. Torvak's smile widened slightly. Then we have a mission beyond survival, to show that cooperation and respect can be stronger than weapons. Moran nodded. Yes, and to prove that even when facing the impossible, humans never give up. We find a way. For the first time, Torvak felt something unfamiliar but welcome. Hope. A hope that reached beyond survival, beyond battle. It was the hope of unity, understanding, and the knowledge that strength was not measured only by power, but by courage and compassion. The two warriors stood together, surveying the ruined battlefield. The dawn light warmed their bodies, but more importantly, it warmed their spirits. They had survived. They had learned. And they had begun a new chapter, not just for themselves, but for the possibility of peace between their peoples. Torvak looked at the inert arrow on the ground, a symbol of danger overcome and a lesson learned. The weapon is gone, but its lesson remains. Strength is not always in the blade, but in the will to endure and the heart to care. Moran nodded in agreement. And that is what makes humans strong, and what can make all of us stronger if we choose to see it. The wind blew softly across the battlefield, carrying with it the scent of fire and the promise of new beginnings. Two warriors, once enemies, now allies in understanding and survival, stepped forward together. The galaxy was wide, filled with dangers and challenges. Yet if humans and aliens could learn from one another, if they could trust and endure, there was hope. A hope that even in the darkest moments, strength would come not only from weapons, but from courage, ingenuity, and unity. Torvak looked at Moran one last time, his voice firm. Human, today you have not only saved me, but you have shown the truth of your people. That truth will be remembered. And your people will see the strength in yours, Moran replied. Together they walked from the ruins, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as survivors and allies. The arrow had been removed, the warrior lived, and a new understanding had been forged, stronger than any weapon. For the first time in a long while, both humans and aliens could see a path toward. A future where courage, respect, and unity defined strength.